Mark found out that Lisa had had an affair, and he was caught up in a couple of emotional cycles. Now, I had a previous post about the obsession cycle, so read that if you haven't read that. I want to talk about the second cycle, though, and that's the depression cycle. And it's a very common cycle that causes emotions to go back and forth. And you go back and forth between anger and depression. In mentors, it's helpful just to understand this back and forth, to know that couples are going to go through it. It's normal. It's a part of the process. So let me tell you a little bit more about the depression cycle. Dave Carter, in his book Torn Asunder, writes about this. And so having that in mind, I asked Mark when we sat down, I said, how you been feeling? He kind of looked at me and he said, well, when? He goes, my emotions are all over the place. And as I talked a little bit more, he was flipping back and forth between this anger and depression. And he was cycling back and forth. And it would happen multiple times in a day, sometimes even within an hour. And again, we've heard this from a lot of couples. But Mark, who didn't understand his emotions, this was all new to him. And he didn't quite know how to handle it. Or he wondered if, is he going out of his head or something? So here's how it goes. On one side, you think only about yourself. And so that leads to blame and you get angry, and you might rage at your spouse. And then, you start thinking about that a little bit more, and then it flips over to the other side and you start thinking only about your mate, and you start to justify and excuse, and say, oh, it's not a big deal, boy, I understand why that happened. And so you justify the actions, and you can even be kind of mad at yourself for being angry about it. And that leads into kind of depression. And so you sit there and you grieve and you don't know how to handle it. And then after a while, you flip back over and start thinking about yourself again. And the cycle starts all over again. And it goes back and forth, oftentimes multiple times. As I mentioned, this is very normal. Now, the problem to getting through it is if you get stuck on either side. So if you get stuck in the anger part of it, it can lead to bitterness and resentment. And you just kind of stay angry. And if you don't process the anger, you can stay there. And that is not going to lead back to a healthy relationship and a healthy connection. Rather, in the future, something's going to come up. It will trigger that, and those feelings will come up all over again. And so people can stay here, and it is not a good place to live, and it is not healthy for your relationship. Now, on the other side, you can get stuck on excusing and dismissing or just trying to quickly forgive. And eventually, you push your emotions down and you don't want to feel them. But the thing is when you start to shut down on your emotions, you shut down on the positive emotions as well. And it doesn't allow love to grow, and the relationship never gets back into this healthy give and take of normal, healthy emotions. And in its worst case, it can end up in depression, and you end up being depressed because you're withholding your emotions and shoving them down and keeping them in. And neither of these two ways is a good way to live, and it's not going to be healthy for your relationship. So let me give mentors some tips. Encourage the couple, 3 things, be angry and be sad. This is part of our forgiveness process. It's the first stage of it, and it is not suppressing your emotions, but it's allowing you to feel your emotions. And just make sure your actions are in a healthy spot, that even in our anger, we don't sin, and we treat people well even though we're angry. So the first one, though, is be angry, be sad. And the second one is talk about your feelings. Part of the processing of deep emotions is to talk about them and to acknowledge them and to know that they're there. We've had a lot of couples that'll come back to us and they'll say, you know what? We have had some of the most intimate talks we've ever had in our marriage, as they're recovering from an affair, because it helps them to emotionally connect, and talking about their feelings will build that emotional connection. And finally, tip 3 is to empathize with your spouse. This is both sides, both the one that had the affair and the one that was betrayed. But it's understanding your spouse's emotions, and they're going through maybe anger and sadness and grief, and empathize with them because they're sharing this with you. But it's very common for the one that is betrayed to kind of think they only have emotions, but that's not true because both sides have emotions. You've both lost in this deal, but you can rebuild and you can reconnect. So those 3 tips again: be angry, be sad, talk about your feelings, and empathize with your spouse. Now, let me say the hope that comes out of this. If you know couples that are struggling, these couples can come out in a better spot than ever before, and their marriage can be stronger than it ever was, if they continue to process and they continue to work on the relationship. And mentors, I'll say some of the best mentors we have are those that have been through affairs and recovered from them. And so I love to get those people involved with the ministry because they can empathize with the spouses they're going through.